The fabric tore with a sound like breaking trust. Zara Baptiste stood in the center of Dustridge High's main hallway, her professional pencil skirt hanging in tatters around her knees. Three boys circled her like wolves who had tasted blood. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Students pressed against lockers, phones raised, recording. Colt Brennan stepped closer. His boots echoed against worn linoleum. His father owned half the county. His smile carried generations of entitlement. "Maybe you should head back where you came from, teacher." The words hung in stale air. Zara's hands remained at her sides, steady, patient. Her dark eyes moved between the three faces. Maverick Sterling to her left, all nervous energy and borrowed courage. Ridge Hawthorne to her right, uncertainty flickering behind his swagger. 60 seconds. That's all it took. Zara's palm found Colt's solar plexus, not a strike, a precise pressure point. His breath left him in a whoosh. He doubled over, gasping. Her legs swept low. Maverick's ankles tangled. He hit the floor hard, textbooks scattering like startled birds. Ridge lunged forward. Zara caught his wrist, applied pressure to the nerve cluster beneath his thumb. He dropped to his knees, his face twisted in surprise and pain. "Please," Ridge whispered, "please stop." The hallway fell silent. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hold their breath. Zara released him. She smoothed what remained of her skirt, adjusted her blazer. The three boys lay sprawled across the floor like broken toys. Students stared through phone screens, their expressions shifting from cruel anticipation to stunned disbelief. "Class starts in 5 minutes," Zara said. Her voice carried no emotion, no satisfaction, just fact. The crowd dispersed like smoke. 2 days earlier, Zara had driven into Dustridge with everything she owned packed into a Honda Civic. The desert town clung to its Wild West identity, with wooden storefronts and dirt roads, tourist traps masquerading as authentic frontier life, the kind of place where the past felt more real than the present. Her phone buzzed constantly during the drive, same number, same voicemail. She never listened to the messages. Some wounds needed silence to heal. Principal Sarah Donnelly had hired her sight unseen. Desperate times called for desperate measures. 3 teachers had quit mid-semester. The reasons varied: stress, family obligations, better opportunities elsewhere. But the pattern remained consistent. They all left after encounters with the same 3 students. Donnelly met her in the parking lot, late 40s, graying hair pulled back severe, tired eyes that had seen too much compromise. "You sure about this?" Donnelly asked, studying Zara's resume again. "These kids can be challenging." Zara shouldered her bag. "I've handled worse." The building felt hollow. Lockers lined corridors like tombstones. Motivational posters peeled at the edges. The smell of disinfectant couldn't quite mask something rotten underneath. Her classroom overlooked the courtyard. Empty picnic tables sat in neat rows. No students gathered there. The space felt abandoned even during lunch periods. That first day, she watched, listened, learned the ecosystem. Colt Brennan held court near the main entrance, tall, blond, wearing his privilege like armor. His father's cattle ranch stretched across 3 counties, town council, school board, the kind of influence that bent rules without breaking them. Maverick Sterling followed Colt's lead. Shorter, stockier, desperate for approval. His family owned the grain elevator. Not quite Brennan money, but enough to matter. Enough to buy silence when needed. Ridge Hawthorne was different, quieter, more thoughtful. His father Marcus commanded respect through military service before building his ranching empire. Ridge carried himself with inherited authority but lacked his friend's casual cruelty. The 3 moved through hallways like sharks. Other students parted before them. Teachers looked away. A carefully maintained system of willful blindness. During lunch, Zara sat in her empty classroom and opened files she wasn't supposed to have. State Education Department letterhead, confidential investigation materials, her real credentials hidden beneath the teaching license. 3 suicide attempts in 18 months. All victims had reported bullying. All reports had been buried or dismissed. The school's donors included the Brennan, Sterling, and Hawthorne families. Generous contributions bought more than new gymnasiums. They bought silence. Her phone buzzed again. The same number. This time she answered. Agent Baptiste. The voice was crisp, official. Status report. I'm in position. Remember, we need documented evidence. Video, audio, witness statements. This has to be airtight or those families will bury it like everything else. Zara watched students hurry past her window, heads down, eyes averted, living in careful fear. Understood. She hung up and locked the files away. Outside, the desert wind rattled windows. Dust devils danced across empty parking lots. The landscape itself seemed to whisper warnings. That afternoon they came for her. The three boys appeared after final bell, casual, unhurried, like predators who had never known defeat. New teacher, Colt said. Not a greeting, a classification. Zara continued packing her bag. Slow, deliberate movements. Every gesture calculated. We should talk, Maverick added. His voice carried false friendliness. About expectations, Ridge finished. Zara finally looked up, met their eyes one by one. Colt's cold confidence, Maverick's eager malice, Ridge's uncomfortable uncertainty. I'm listening. Colt smiled. The expression held no warmth. This is our school, our town. Things work a certain way here. Previous teachers understood that, Maverick said. Smart teachers, Ridge added quietly. Zara zipped her bag, shouldered it, walked toward the door. The three boys didn't move, blocking her path, testing boundaries. Excuse me, she said. They stepped aside. This time. The real test would come later. They always escalated gradually, built confidence, established dominance. Zara had seen it before. Different schools, different bullies, same pattern. She walked to her car knowing they were watching, planning, already crafting tomorrow's humiliation. Her phone buzzed. Another message from the number she'd been avoiding. This time she listened. Zara, please. We need to talk. What happened wasn't your fault. Come home. She deleted the message, started the engine, drove toward her rented apartment as the sun bled orange across the desert sky. Tomorrow would bring the real confrontation. She could feel it building like a storm. The boys would push harder, go public, make an example of her like they had the others. But unlike the others, Zara carried secrets of her own. Skills learned in places where survival meant more than keeping a job, where weakness invited worse than humiliation. They thought they knew her, thought they understood what they were dealing with. Tomorrow, they would learn otherwise. The desert wind howled through empty streets, carrying whispers of change. The security footage told stories the school board didn't want to hear. Zara sat in her empty classroom after hours, laptop screen casting blue light across incident reports, 3 years of documentation, patterns hidden in plain sight. Tyler Morrison, 16, found unconscious in the gymnasium, officially ruled an accident. Unofficially, witnesses reported seeing him cornered by familiar faces. Sarah Chen, 15, discovered in the bathroom with rope burns around her wrists. Suspension ruled it horseplay gone wrong. The girl transferred schools the next week. Marcus Williams, 17, hospitalized after what appeared to be a severe allergic reaction. No one mentioned the peanut butter smeared inside his locker. No one asked who knew about his allergy. The desert wind rattled windows. Dust swirled across empty parking lots like ghosts of buried secrets. Zara's phone buzzed. State Department check-in. She let it ring. The hallway security cameras had recorded everything. Every shove, every cruel word, every moment of systematic torment that drove 3 children to desperate measures. The footage sat in digital storage, archived but never reviewed, never acted upon. Principal Donnelly kept the files locked away. Donor families kept their contributions flowing. The system sustained itself through willful blindness. Zara closed the laptop, walked to her window, watched the town settle into evening darkness. Porch lights flickered on like distant stars. Normal families living normal lives while poison festered in their children's school. Her reflection stared back from the glass. Hollow eyes, weathered hands, the face of someone who had seen too much and saved too little. The parking lot held one other car, a black pickup truck with ranch plates. She recognized it from her first day. Marcus Hawthorne's vehicle. He appeared at her classroom door without knocking. Tall, weathered, carrying himself with military precision. His son's eyes but aged by wisdom and regret. "Agent Baptiste?" Zara's hand moved instinctively toward her bag, where she kept things that weren't standard teaching supplies. "I know who you are," Marcus continued. "Marine Corps, Force Recon. Those techniques you used on the boys. I've seen them before." He stepped into the room, closed the door behind him. The gesture felt less like a threat than a confession. "How long have you known?" "Since the first day. The way you moved, assessed threats, positioned yourself with sightlines to exits." He sat across from her desk. "I did 3 tours in Afghanistan, recognized the signs." The air between them held weight, shared understanding of worlds most people never glimpsed. "Your son is becoming something I don't recognize." Marcus stared at his hands, calloused from ranch work, scarred from war. "His mother died when he was 12. Cancer. I threw myself into work, let the wrong influences fill the void." Zara studied his face. Genuine pain lived there, the kind that came from watching someone you love slip away. "The Brennan boy. Colonel. He's got charisma, leadership qualities. Under different circumstances, he could be remarkable." Marcus shook his head. "Instead, he's poison. And my son drinks it willingly." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've been documenting things too. Ranch security cameras cover the road to school. I've seen what happens in the parking lot. The aftermath when kids go home crying. The pattern of broken spirits." He pulled out a tablet, showed her video files, timestamps going back 2 years. Different angles of the same systematic cruelty. "I kept thinking someone would stop it, that the school would act, that other parents would speak up." His voice carried the weight of failed hope. Instead, they enabled it, donated money to buy silence, made excuses for behavior that would be criminal in any other context. Zara felt something shift, a crack in the wall she'd built around this mission. Marcus wasn't just another parent making excuses. He was a soldier who recognized the enemy. "What do you want from me?" "Help me save my son before it's too late, before he becomes something irredeemable." The request hung between them like a bridge. Cross it, and her mission became personal. Maintain distance, and another child might be lost. "I can't compromise my investigation." "I'm not asking you to. I'm offering to help." Marcus leaned forward. "The school board meets next week. Budget discussions. The donor families will be there. If you need inside information, access to private conversations, I can provide it." "Why would you risk your standing in the community?" "Because my standing doesn't matter if my son becomes a monster." The words carried finality. A father's last stand against forces that had already claimed too much. Zara considered the proposal, weighed risks against potential gains. Marcus Hawthorne represented access to the inner circle, the families who controlled the school's response to documented abuse. "If I agree, this stays between us. No one else knows." "Understood." They shook hands. The gesture felt like forming an alliance against darkness. After Marcus left, Zara returned to the security footage. This time, she focused on Ridge Hawthorne, watched him follow Colt's lead with increasing reluctance, saw moments of hesitation, glimpses of the boy he might have been. Unlike Colt's calculated cruelty or Maverick's desperate need for acceptance, Ridge showed cracks, moments where conscience fought against conformity, where his father's better values surfaced before being buried again. The phone rang. State Department, persistent as always. "Agent Baptiste, we need an update." "The situation is more complex than initial reports suggested. The abuse is systematic, institutional, enabled at the highest levels." "Do you have actionable evidence?" Zara stared at the laptop screen. Hours of footage, years of documentation, a father's desperate offer to help save his son. I'm building a case, but it will take time. Time we may not have. The federal investigation is expanding. If we don't move soon, jurisdiction might shift to other agencies. I understand. Complete your documentation. Submit your report. Get out of there before you become too involved. The line went dead. Zara set the phone aside and returned to her work. Too involved. The words echoed in the empty classroom. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly. Stars appeared one by one, pinpricks of light in vast darkness. The same stars that had watched over her during night missions in places where good and evil wore clearer uniforms. Here, the lines blurred. Children carried poison learned from parents who should have known better. Institutions that should protect instead enabled harm. And she found herself caring about outcomes in ways that made her mission more complicated. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Hawthorne. School board meeting moved to tomorrow night. Emergency session. Donor families called it after hearing about the hallway incident. They want you gone. Zara stared at the message. The timeline was accelerating. Forces were mobilizing. The careful investigation she'd planned was being compressed into something more urgent. She gathered her files, locked them in her bag, walked through empty hallways where children learned to live in fear, where futures were decided by wealth and influence rather than truth and justice. Tomorrow night would bring confrontation. The donor families would use their power to remove the threat she represented. They would expect her to fold under pressure like the teachers before her. They didn't know she'd faced worse than small-town politics. Survived situations where surrender meant death. Learned to fight battles on multiple fronts while maintaining cover. The desert wind followed her to the parking lot. Dust swirled around her feet like whispered warnings. Change was coming to Dustridge. The question remained whether it would arrive in time to save the children who needed it most. She drove home through empty streets, past houses where families slept peacefully, while their children carried secrets too heavy for young shoulders. Tomorrow would test everyone's resolve. The stars watched, silent witnesses to approaching storm. The photos appeared on social media at dawn. Zara found them while drinking coffee in her kitchen. Her face digitally placed onto compromising images. Text messages fabricated to suggest inappropriate contact with students. The kind of evidence that destroyed careers before investigations could begin. Colt Brennan had been busy overnight. The posts spread like wildfire through Dustridge's social networks. Parents shared them with righteous anger. Students screenshot them before they could be deleted. By sunrise, half the town believed their new teacher was a predator. Zara's phone buzzed incessantly. State Department, school district, local news stations smelling blood. She silenced them all. The fabricated evidence was sophisticated, professional quality. Someone with resources had helped Colt construct his revenge, the kind of help that came from family connections and unlimited budgets. At school, whispers followed her through hallways. Parents demanded meetings. Principal Donnelly avoided eye contact. The carefully constructed lie had achieved its purpose before truth could catch up. But lies, like desert storms, sometimes destroyed more than intended. During lunch period, something unexpected happened. Emma Rodriguez, a quiet sophomore, approached Zara's classroom. Behind her walked 3 other students, then 5 more. Soon, a dozen teenagers filled the space. Emma stepped forward. Her hands trembled, but her voice held steady. "Ms. Baptiste, we know the truth." The others nodded. Faces that had learned to hide in shadows now carried determination. "Tyler Morrison was my friend," Emma continued. "What happened to him wasn't an accident. We saw everything. We just never had anyone to tell." More students appeared in the doorway. Then more. A generation of victims finding voice. Sarah Chen spoke next. "They made my life hell until I couldn't breathe anymore. My parents transferred me to protect me. But I never forgot." Marcus Williams stepped forward. "I almost died from that allergic reaction. The doctors said another hour and my organs would have failed. Their testimonies came like rain after drought, years of suppressed truth flowing freely. Colt's desperate attempt to destroy Zara had instead opened floodgates he couldn't control. But desperation makes people dangerous. The next morning, Colt appeared at school carrying something in his backpack. Not weapons designed to kill, something else. A taser, pepper spray, tools meant to intimidate rather than murder. He cornered Zara in the supply closet. The small space smelled of chalk dust and old paper. Institutional neglect made manifest. "You're going to resign," he said. "Today, in front of everyone." Zara turned slowly, studied his face, saw fear masquerading as aggression. A boy who had never been told no discovering the weight of consequences. "Or what?" Colt's hand moved toward his backpack. "Or I make sure you leave anyway." The moment crystallized. All her training focused on this point. Neutralize the threat. Protect innocent people. Complete the mission. Instead, she did something unexpected. She sat down on a box of supplies, made herself smaller, less threatening. "Tell me about your mother." The question caught him off guard. His hand paused on the backpack zipper. "What?" "Your mother. What would she think about what you've become?" Colt's jaw tightened. "Don't talk about her." "She raised you to be better than this." "She's dead." The words came out sharp. Broken glass in sunlight. "I know. Car accident when you were 14. Drunk driver?" Colt's composure cracked. "How do you know that?" "Because I've seen your file. Your real file. Honor roll before the accident. Student council. Volunteer work at the animal shelter." Zara's voice remained gentle. "You were a good kid who lost his way after tragedy." "Shut up." "Your mother would be heartbroken to see what you've become." Colt lunged forward, not with the taser, with his fists, grief and rage propelling him beyond reason. Zara moved like water around stone, redirected his momentum, used his own force to guide him to the ground, pressure points applied with surgical precision, neutralization without harm. He lay on the dusty floor, tears streaming down his face, the tough facade finally crumbling. "I miss her," he whispered. "I miss her so much." Zara knelt beside him. "I know you do." The supply closet door opened. Principal Donnelly appeared, followed by security guards. Behind them stood Marcus Hawthorne and several other parents. They had heard the commotion. "What happened here?" Donnelly demanded. Zara looked down at Colt, still crying on the floor. A broken boy who had broken others in his pain. "A student needed help," she said simply. That afternoon, the truth came out anyway. Not through Zara's investigation, but through the courage of children who had found their voices. Emma Rodriguez spoke at the emergency school board meeting, then Sarah Chen, then Marcus Williams. One by one, they testified about years of systematic abuse, about a culture of silence that protected perpetrators and abandoned victims, about adults who chose comfort over courage. The fabricated photos were exposed as fraud. Digital forensics revealed their artificial nature. Colt's desperate gambit had backfired completely. But the revelations went deeper than anyone expected. Security footage emerged from multiple sources. Marcus Hawthorne's ranch cameras, business surveillance from Main Street, private recordings parents had made of their children's testimonies. The evidence painted a picture of institutional failure, of wealth protecting cruelty, of power used to silence the vulnerable. By evening, the story had reached regional news outlets. Social media carried the testimonies beyond Dustridge's borders, the kind of exposure that forced action rather than enabling cover-ups. Colt Brennan sat in the principal's office with his father. The older man's face showed shock at revelations about his son's behavior, years of willful blindness ending in devastating clarity. Maverick Sterling had been pulled from school by parents who finally understood their donations had enabled rather than educated. The family was seeking therapy, trying to repair damage that ran deeper than anyone realized. Ridge Hawthorne sat with his father in the parking lot, the two men talking honestly for the first time in years. About loss, about responsibility, about the difference between strength and cruelty. Zara watched from her classroom window as families confronted truths they had avoided. The desert sky stretched endlessly above, stars appearing as darkness fell. The same stars that had witnessed countless acts of courage and cowardice throughout human history. Her phone rang. State Department again. Agent Baptiste, we've been monitoring the situation. The media attention changes everything. How so? Your cover is blown. Everyone knows you're not just a teacher now. We need to extract you immediately. Zara looked around her classroom, at the handwritten thank you notes from brave students, at the lesson plans she had prepared for tomorrow, at the small space where she had begun to imagine a different kind of future. I'm not leaving. This wasn't part of the mission parameters. The mission parameters changed when children started finding their voices. Silence on the line. Then, reluctantly, what are you proposing? I want to stay, as a real teacher, help rebuild what was broken. That's not how this works. Maybe it's how this should work. The conversation ended without resolution. Zara set the phone aside and returned to grading papers. Outside, the desert wind carried whispers of change. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for healing. The stars watched over Dustridge as the town began the slow work of confronting its shadows. Some wounds required more than exposure to heal. They needed time, patience, people willing to stay and do the difficult work of rebuilding trust. Zara intended to be one of those people. The courtroom smelled of dust and broken promises. Zara sat in the witness chair. State files spread before her like evidence of institutional failure. 3 months had passed since the hallway confrontation. 3 months of investigations, testimonies, and painful revelations that had shaken Dustridge to its foundation. District Attorney Sarah Martinez reviewed the evidence methodically. Security footage from multiple sources, medical records documenting injuries, digital forensics proving the fabricated photos. Most damning of all, the testimonies of 23 students who had finally found their voices. Agent Baptiste, please explain your findings to the court. Zara's voice carried the weight of documented truth. Systematic harassment spanning 3 years, administrative negligence, donor influence compromising student safety, a culture of silence that enabled escalating abuse. The gallery held faces she had come to know. Emma Rodriguez sat with her parents, no longer hiding in shadows. Marcus Williams attended every session, his presence a testament to survival. Sarah Chen had returned from her new school to testify, her courage inspiring others to speak. In the defendants section, 3 families faced consequences they had never imagined possible. The Brennan family sat in the front row. Robert Brennan's cattle empire couldn't buy his son's innocence this time. His wife clutched tissues, finally understanding what her donations had actually purchased. The Sterling family had withdrawn from public life entirely. Their grain elevator empire meant nothing when measured against the harm their silence had enabled. Marcus Hawthorne sat alone. His presence in court wasn't as a defendant, but as a witness for the prosecution. The choice had cost him friendships and business relationships. He bore the isolation with military dignity. Judge Patricia Morales reviewed the sentencing recommendations. Community service, counseling, restorative justice programs designed to heal rather than simply punish. Colt Brennan approached the bench. The boy who had once ruled hallways through fear now stood vulnerable before justice. 3 months of therapy had revealed the grief and abandonment that had twisted his leadership qualities into cruelty. 200 hours of community service at the Veterans Hospital, mandatory counseling, victim impact sessions with every student you harmed. Judge Morales paused. This is your opportunity to become who your mother raised you to be. Colt nodded, tears streaming down his face. Yes, Your Honor. Maverick Sterling received similar sentencing. His desperate need for acceptance would be redirected toward helping other students struggling with belonging. The boy who had followed others into darkness would learn to lead toward light. Ridge Hawthorne's case was different. His testimony against his former friends had shown genuine remorse and understanding. The judge sentenced him to peer counseling training and community leadership programs. Use your family's influence for good, she instructed. Show this community what real leadership looks like. 6 months later, Zara stood in her classroom watching transformation unfold. The space had been renovated. Bright colors replaced institutional beige. Student artwork covered walls once bare. Most importantly, the atmosphere had changed. Fear no longer haunted these hallways. Emma Rodriguez served as student council president. Her quiet strength had blossomed into natural leadership. The girl who had once hidden from bullies now advocated for others facing similar struggles. Marcus Williams ran the peer support program. His near-death experience had given him unique perspective on resilience. Students who felt isolated found hope in his story of survival and recovery. Sarah Chen visited monthly, sharing her experience with students at other schools. Her testimony had inspired legislative changes protecting whistleblowers in educational settings. The three boys faced different paths toward redemption. Colt Brennan worked at the Veterans Hospital every weekend. The old soldiers didn't care about his family's wealth or his past mistakes. They judged him by his actions, his willingness to serve others who had sacrificed more than he could imagine. The work was humbling, feeding patients who couldn't feed themselves, reading to men whose eyes had seen too much, listening to stories of genuine heroism that made his former behavior seem petty and cruel. Slowly, the boy his mother had raised began to emerge. The natural leader who used strength to protect rather than dominate. Veterans who had commanded respect through service became his new role models. Maverick Sterling attended military academy in another state. The structure and discipline were exactly what he needed. Away from peer pressure and family expectations, he discovered his own identity. Letters to his former victims showed genuine understanding of the harm he had caused. Ridge Hawthorne had transformed most completely. Working with his father, he established a foundation supporting anti-bullying programs in rural schools. His family's influence became a force for positive change rather than enabling silence. He visited Zara's classroom regularly, sharing his story with new students. The vulnerability required to admit past mistakes had become his greatest strength. "I was a coward," he told them. "I followed others into darkness because I was afraid to stand alone in the light. Don't make my mistakes." Principal Donnelly had been replaced by Maria Santos, a former military educator who understood the importance of culture change. Zero tolerance for harassment. Mandatory reporting of incidents. Family counseling resources for both victims and perpetrators. The donor families no longer controlled school policies. Community oversight ensured their contributions supported education rather than purchased influence. Zara found her true calling in this transformed environment. The investigation skills that had served her as an agent now helped her identify struggling students before problems escalated. Her military training provided structure and discipline that created safe learning spaces. She established a self-defense program that emphasized confidence over aggression. Students learned to protect themselves while respecting others. Physical techniques came with philosophical lessons about strength serving justice rather than personal gain. The program attracted students across social boundaries. Athletes trained alongside artists. Honor students learned alongside those struggling academically. The common ground was mutual respect and shared growth. On quiet afternoons, Zara stood at her classroom window, watching students gather in the courtyard. The space that had once been empty now buzzed with conversation and laughter. Picnic tables hosted study groups that mixed grade levels and social circles. The transformation hadn't been easy. Some families had left town rather than confront their roles in enabling abuse. Others had doubled down on denial, claiming outside agitators had destroyed their community's values. But enough people had chosen growth over comfort. Enough voices had joined the chorus demanding better. Enough courage had emerged to sustain lasting change. The desert sky stretched endlessly above, stars appearing as evening settled over Dustridge. The same stars that had witnessed the town's darkest moments now observed its healing. Zara's phone buzzed. A text from her former handler at the State Department. "Heard about the community service program. Proud of the work you're doing. The mission was always bigger than documentation." She smiled and deleted the message. Some missions ended with reports filed and cases closed. Others evolved into something more meaningful. the work of rebuilding trust and teaching young people to choose courage over cruelty. That evening, she drove through streets where children now walked safely, past houses where families had learned to have difficult conversations about values and accountability, through a community that had chosen to confront its shadows rather than live in willful darkness. The desert wind carried whispers of change across the landscape, change that had begun with one woman's refusal to accept injustice and grown into a movement powered by young voices finding their strength. In the distance, lights flickered on like stars coming home to Earth, each one representing a family, a student, a second chance at becoming something better. The work continued. It always would. But for the first time in years, hope outweighed fear in the halls of Dustridge High School.